Hey everyone, today I'm going to be talking about everything that you can sow 6 weeks before your last frost date. I happen to be in central New Jersey, zone 7A, but regardless of where you're located and what zone you're in, this will apply to you if you're 6 weeks before your last frost date. This is the third installment in a series I'm doing called What to Sow Before Your Last Frost Date. In my next video, 4 weeks before your last frost date, I'll be going out into the garden. I'll be sowing a lot of my root crops. I'll be sowing peas, and then I'll also be transplanting some of the stuff that I have here in the house. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I'll do a quick overview on how my seedlings are doing in the house, what I'm doing to keep them healthy and strong before I get them planted out in the garden. So if you haven't liked and subscribed, be sure to do so you never miss an upcoming video. The first thing I'm going to sow are tomatoes. Now, typical seed packet for tomatoes will give you a range of 6 to 8 weeks. So while I'm at my 6-week mark, you may think that this is the last week for me to sow my tomatoes. However, I've gone 5 weeks before my last frost date and I got an amazing crop of tomatoes. You can even go 4 weeks before your last frost date. The thing about tomatoes is they do germinate pretty quickly and they get tall pretty quickly. So, you know, if you don't have the space and they're getting bigger, you have to pot them up and it becomes more difficult to manage these plants. They can get pretty big fairly quickly. And then it also makes it difficult when you have to harden them off and you're carrying them in and out of the house. And when you get them planted in the garden, tomatoes like to be planted deeply. So whether you plant them vertically, higher up on the stem, or if you plant them flat and just sort of turn them up a little bit, the bigger they are, like the longer their stem is, the more difficult it is to actually get them planted properly. So I'd say that if you're like at your 8-week mark before your last frost date, definitely give it a couple of extra weeks. Don't be in a rush to get your tomatoes planted. Even if you waited to like 4 weeks or 5 weeks before your last frost date, you will definitely still have plenty of time to get growth on your tomatoes and to get them planted in time in your garden. I have one determinate variety and the rest are indeterminate. And in case you're not aware what those two things mean, basically a determinate tomato just means that it grows to a certain height and then it stops. Typically they grow to like 3 to 4 feet tall, they're bushier, they don't necessarily need to be staked, and then they produce fruit over a shorter period of time because they reach maturity in a quicker time frame. They produce their fruit quicker. While indeterminate tomatoes grow much taller, they do require staking, often a cage and a stake. Sometimes they can grow as tall as 8, even 10 feet tall under the right conditions and the length of the growing season, and they take a little bit longer to produce fruit. And since they grow larger faster, I am going to be starting them in these larger pots. However, I'm only filling the pot with the mix about 3/4 of the way up, and as the tomato starts to grow, I will add more soil because the tomato will be forming roots along its stem. So I will be encouraging more root growth by adding more soil as the tomato is growing. Tomatoes need to be sown 1/4 inch deep. It doesn't have to be exact. Make a small hole, put your tomato seeds in there, and then cover them back up. You just want to have good contact between the seed and the soil, and then put a humidity dome on them and put them on a heat mat. I want to mention that I start most of my seeds in a seed starter of coco coir and perlite. They then get potted up and I add in some additional nutrients like worm castings. But since everything I'm planting today is going to remain in their pots and seed cells until they get planted out, I started them with worm castings added to the seed starter of coco coir and perlite. And that should help them along through the seedling phase. I'm also going to be sowing basil. I have several different kinds of basil here that I'm going to sow. Holy basil, Italian large leaf. I have purple, lemon, Greek, Genovese, Thai, and then I also have cinnamon basil, which is, it's got a really sweet, delicious, fragrant scent and taste to it. So if you've never tried cinnamon basil, I highly suggest getting your hands on some and trying it out this season. I also overwintered one of my basil plants, and so I just dug it up, put it in a pot, and brought it indoors, and it's been in front of a sunny window the entire time. I water it once a week, and I just recently put a little bit of worm castings on top of the soil before I watered it, just to give it some nutrients because it was looking a little tired. I really only brought it in to use it over winter. I didn't plan on replanting it. However, I will show you that, if you could see, some new growth formed here on the main stem. And on some of the branches as well, it might be a little tough to see. So I am actually going to attempt to repot this outdoors in spring. So what I'll do is I'll trim back this main stem probably in about 2 weeks time until it's ready to be planted out. It'll remain here unless of course it's becoming root bound, then I will pot it up, but we'll see. It'll be an experiment. I'm not really sure if it'll work once I replant it, and of course I'll harden it off just like anything else I'm planting, but I do have hope that this will, because it does have the growth coming from the main stem, that this will actually flourish when I plant it in the spring. I'm also going to be sowing Florence fennel. Fennel is a bulbing vegetable. It's delicious. It has licorice flavors to it. There's two things you should know about fennel. One, they should not be planted next to any other plant or vegetable because they release a chemical compound that will inhibit the growth of anything it's planted next to. So when you are planting it out, give it its own pot or grow bag. The other thing you should know is that it doesn't necessarily love to be transplanted. I am starting it indoors. I'm giving it its own large pots to give it enough room. You can start them indoors. You just have to be really careful when you plant them out not to disturb their roots. It can also be direct sown a couple of weeks before the last frost date if you choose to do it that way, which you can do also. And the planting depth is the same as tomatoes, 1/4 inch. In fact, everything I'm going to show you today is 1/4 inch depth. Next, I'm going to be sowing some flowers. So I have my marigold seeds here. These are actually seeds that I harvested from the marigolds I grew last season. If there's only one flower that you're going to grow in your garden, then I suggest it's marigold. Marigold is an incredibly helpful garden flower. It's a great companion plant. It goes with just about everything. It attracts pollinators. It repels bad bugs. So if you're planting flowers and you only have room for one flower, then I'd say definitely go with the marigold. And then the last item I'm sowing today, another flower, is Black-Eyed Susan. It is a flowering plant. It is a perennial, so it will come back every year. It will multiply underground. It also self-seeds, so it'll drop seeds, die back, and then return in the following season. Now, the two things I'll mention about Black-Eyed Susans, they do require cold stratification. I've mentioned this quite a bit in some of my previous videos, but if you're unfamiliar, cold stratification is the process that mimics the dormancy of winter for perennials, and it really does help them with germination. Not all of them, but some of them do require it. And it's basically where you take seeds, you put them on a damp paper towel, you put them in a freezer bag, you put them in the refrigerator for anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months. This has been in the refrigerator for about 30 days and it is ready to be planted. The other thing I'll mention is that they need light to germinate. So unlike everything else I showed you today where you are sowing them 1/4 inch deep and covering them with soil, they don't require light to germinate, so you can keep them in the dark until they do germinate, and then when they poke through, you put them in the light. This needs to be started in the light. So here they are on the damp paper towel, and in fact, some of them have actually already started to germinate. So here it is. You can see that it is broken through the seed. Nothing changes about the way you sow it. You still put it on top of the soil and just gently press it in so there's contact between the soil and the seed. The rest of them are just going to be sprinkled right on top. You can also just gently press them in and then put them under the light. Everything is now in the greenhouse. I'll give you a quick tour of what I have in here and how it's doing. So here are the Black-Eyed Susans under the light, and then the basil and marigold down below, also on heat mats. Everything's got humidity domes and heat mats. Those are the tomatoes and fennel down below there. Are the pepper seedlings. They've actually doubled in size since I potted them up last week. They look fantastic, and actually I just gave them some fertilizer. More peppers. I actually have quite a lot of peppers, so I'm going to end up giving a lot of these away because it's more than I have space for, and I did overseed my peppers, so I have quite a lot and I will end up giving a lot away. Here are the tomatillos, and just like the tomatoes, I am adding more soil as they grow because they also will grow roots along their stem. And here's eggplant. It is a slow grower like peppers, but it is forming good roots, which is important. I have a tray of kale here. That looks really good. And then I have a tray of bok choy. Both are going to be planted out in about 2 weeks. Here are the dahlias. They already needed to be potted up. I'm excited about getting those in the garden. I have a tray of lettuce here, as well as some herbs, rosemary. I have chamomile. I have some anise, and I have lemon balm in here as well. And here are the 2 trays of onions. I have a tray of bulbing onions and a tray of green onions. These also will be planted out in 2 weeks. And that's perfect timing because it'll free up my shelves for the cucumber and zucchini I'm sowing 4 weeks before my last frost. I also have 2 trays of geranium, and then I also in the back here have some parsley from seed I harvested from last season's parsley, and in the back of this tray I have some thyme. And I wanted to show you how my overwintered peppers are doing. They look fantastic. I mean, this is so lush. It's got such a deep green color. I gave it a little bit of worm castings a couple of weeks ago and watered it in really well. They're getting watered about every 5 days now. And this third one that had no growth is finally putting on some growth. It woke up and it's got a couple of leaves coming off these side nodes. So everything's looking really fantastic. And this is going to be a really exciting garden season. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe so you never miss another.